I will call the April 5th, 2010 meeting of the Anchorage Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Rick Morrison.
Mr. Morrison is no longer on the commission.
Okay. Let me mark him absent for right now. For
Okay.
the system.
Okay.
Nancy Pease. Here. Jim Frederick.
Here.
Connie Yoshimura. Tony Jones.
Here.
Arthur Isham.
Here.
John Weddleton.
Here.
Bruce Phelps. Stacy Dean.
Here.
We have a quorum. Okay, the next item on our agenda are minutes, and we have no minutes for approval this evening. Special orders of business. Mr. Isham, disclosures.
Ms. Pease, do you have anything to disclose this evening?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Frederick?
No.
Ms. Jones?
I just have a couple of statements to make for the record. In the past, I have abstained from cases that came before the commission that related to AWWU or Chugach Electric Association. I never, the law firm that I used to work for represented both of those entities with regard to regulatory matters, and I did not work on anything, on any matters at all, and certainly nothing to do with this. So I'm just making that disclosure for the record.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Phelps, just... Nothing? Okay. Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, I do occasionally work for Providence, Alaska Hospital, usually on their other properties, not on the hospital itself. Just as a disclosure, they are an occasional customer of mine. I have no involvement at all in these cases. The other thing that I'd like to discuss is potentially putting off the 3 cases that are involving Title 21.
Okay. As soon as we get done with this, with the disclosures, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Mm-hmm.
Okay. So basically, you've been a contractor to Providence. Okay. That's all right. I don't think that impacts on these.
Well, I've certainly been a good customer of theirs over the years, and I don't consider that to disqualify me.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton?
No disclosures.
And I have none.
Okay. Before we take up the consent agenda, I will entertain your motion, Ms. Dean.
I motion to move into next week's hearing on Monday night, E1, which is case 2010-021, case G7, which is case 2010-038, and G8, case 2010-037. I don't know if it's possible, but I think it would be great if we could move it to next week.
Okay, is there a second? Oh, Mr. Weddleton seconded. Okay. Does, before we vote on this, does staff have any objection? No. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It would probably be good for Ms. Dean to state the reasons, and then also I do have the concern, especially with the site condo proposal. We had specifically wanted a public hearing on that, and I don't know whether people in the audience had come to testify on that, but we should consider the 2 items that are public hearings and whether we're inconveniencing the public. So with that.
Okay. Ms. Dean, would you speak to your motion, please?
Madam Chair, the reason I asked for it was a request by Commissioner Yoshimura, who was unable to attend tonight, that would like to attend on Monday. I'm relaying this through a motion.
Okay. I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience tonight that came specifically to testify on the site condo ordinance that we had advertised for public hearing tonight. The other items on Title 21, many of them have been closed, the hearings have been closed, that would not be able to come back next Monday night. I'm not seeing anyone that would be, yes.
Madam Chair, the wind ordinance is also up for public hearing this evening.
Oh, okay. Anyone here for the wind ordinance that would not be able to come back next week? Okay. All right. Seeing that it doesn't look like anyone would be inconvenienced by us moving these till next week, and we have a very light agenda next week also. And I would expect these would come up under unfinished business next week.
That is correct.
Excuse me?
That is correct.
Okay. Is there any objection? Excuse.
The site condo, if it's a public hearing, would have to still be under public hearing.
It would have to still be okay.
Because it's a public hearing.
I don't know that we're prohibited from doing public hearings under unfinished business. Ms. Chambers?
Through the chair, you would, E is unfinished business and actions of public hearings. Usually you put items there, the public hearings aren't closed, but you can put them there if you just want to make sure they get heard first. And people are aware of that. It doesn't matter if they're closed or not. If you are wanting them to be heard first on the agenda before anything else, and the second agenda is usually for the long-range planning cases, you can put it under E. Or you could put it under G, public hearing items. It doesn't really matter.
I'll leave it to staff's discretion, but I want them to be the first public hearings on next week's agenda. And since the agenda's already been published for next week, or at least we've gotten a copy, we'll need an addendum.
That is correct.
Okay. And I heard objection to this being postponed, so we probably need to vote.
May I speak?
Yes.
My objection? Okay. Well, I really think that this cases and so forth have been posted. They've been out there for a month. And just because one of our members can't make it tonight, I really don't see that as a reason to postpone it. It seems like kind of a frivolous reason, quite honestly. It's not like we only have 5 people. We've got almost a full board less one. And so I see no reason to postpone.
Okay. Ms. Pease?
Do we have any sort of precedent on this? I know that we try to schedule certain items for hearing if we know that a member with a particular area of expertise can't attend, but would this be an unusual step? I guess I'm asking for your institutional
Yes, okay.
memory.
Probably.
Through the chair.
Yes.
It has happened on occasion, but rare.
Mm-hmm. Well, since there's objection, we probably need to use our voting machines.
Can I add a comment?
Yes.
I can't participate in one of these discussions this evening, specifically E1, and so I would think that given that it might be advisable to postpone into the following week when you have another member of the commission available that could vote on this.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton, I see you in the queue.
Well, maybe following that, I wonder if we could amend the motion so that we would postpone E1, but not postpone the public hearings on G7 and G8. I got Commissioner Goshamer's email as well, and I know she was certainly interested in the E1, probably will be in G8, but we could do the public hearing, she could listen to the tapes, and we could possibly deliberate at the next meeting.
It's up to the maker of the motion, but we need, if she wishes to, or someone needs to amend the motion, but we need to do something to move forward.
I'll offer that as a friendly amendment if it's accepted.
I accept.
Okay, so the motion is now to postpone E1 only.
Yes. And then G 7 and 8.
8, we would continue on to have the hearing on this evening.
But we'll have our final deliberations next week.
Well, we can't commit to that right now.
Okay.
We can't commit to anything until we take action after the hearing. Is there any objection to postponing E1 until next week? Hearing none, E1 is postponed until next week. All right. I would at this time like to offer an agenda. Mr. Phelps, you had something else to add? Okay. I would like to offer an agenda change. Mr. Davis, you were in the queue.
Apologize if it is a consideration. If you postpone one and leave the others, or leave the others, postpone the other, break them up, in other words, you do have the Title 21 project staff sitting at 2 meetings instead of 1. Whatever decision you make, you might consider that. Thank you.
From a cost standpoint,
Madam Chair?
yes.
You could also reorder the agenda to do the public hearings on Title 21 first. It doesn't look like there's a great number of people who are planning to testify.
Through the chair, I think the action's already been taken. You're hearing the other items. You just postponed one of them.
Yeah, we know
So-
we're going to
so
hear
G-
7 and 8. It's a
G7 or
matter
8 are still going to be heard tonight.
right, it's a matter of when we hear them
Correct.
tonight. But right now, we're going to do an agenda change to have the, with concurrence from other commissioners, to hear, out of order, to hear item G6. We haven't even finished, we haven't dealt with the rest of the consent agenda, but I would like the first public hearing item we have tonight to be item G6. G1 and G2, for people in the audience, have been postponed. G1 has been postponed indefinitely, and G2 is being postponed until next week. Is there any objection to G1 being the first public hearing item this evening?
Madam Chair, G6, right?
G6 being moved to that G1 spot. Yes, that would be good to have someone.
So moved.
Well, Mr. Isham and Mr. Frederick. Any objection? Hearing none, G6 will be our first public hearing item. And now we need to go back and deal with our consent agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
move for approval of consent agenda items D1, A, B, and C, and 4.
4A.
4A, right.
Okay. And I just, tonight, want to make a statement that I'm going to be running a tight gavel tonight, and we're not going to be spending a lot of time on lots of editing and changes. Hopefully, a lot of things have been worked out with staff already. Okay, Mr. Weddleton?
I'd like to pull D1A. Was there a second on that motion?
Yeah. All right.
Oh, Jim.
No, there hasn't been a second on the motion for the consent agenda. Thank you, John. Any other items to be pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, D1B and D1C.
Okay. Any objection to the time extend, to D, or 4A? Hearing none, that is approved. All right. Now, moving on D1A, Mr. Weddleton.
A couple things on this on page 4. On I-1, on the last sentence, says design and construction standards no later than the third building. And I believe that should say something like no later than the start of the construction of the third building.
Through the chair, we usually interpret that was what it would mean. We wouldn't allow full permits until that happened.
Okay.
It means the same thing. If you would like to, for clarification purposes, but really staff would say no permits until you do that.
If that's what it means, then that's fine.
That's what it means, yes.
Then on page 5, part 6, it says if the parking is to be used in common. On part B2G, it says they will share parking. That's on page 3, and here we are on page 5, and it says if the parking is to be used in common. And my recollection is that the arrangement for this was that there would be parking agreements between all the different lots in this development.
Through the chair, yes. Can you refer me to the correct page and item number again?
Let's see, page 3 on, excuse me, G, which would be B2G.
Correct.
Says entering in a common use agreement with the municipality. This is a condition of approval, I think.
Right.
So, you would enter in a common use agreement with the municipality for joint use of the parking spaces. And then on page 5, part 6, it says if the parking is to be used in common. It just, one says you will, one says you might. And my recollection is that.
My recollection is they will.
Beg your pardon?
My recollection is that there's some might and some might not. Some may be used in common and some might not be used in common. So therefore, the conditions are appropriate. Where they have to enter into a joint access or a joint use agreement, they will. Where all their parking is on their individual fragment lot, they will not need to enter into any type of shared agreement. So as the buildings come forward with the plans, some of them won't need to share and some of them will.
Well,
it's confusing because of that, because of the type of fragment lot site plan it is.
Well, the way I read both of these is that the declaration rules.
The declarations will rule. And the declarations will control which lot has what parking, which lots have to share, and then the city will have to be a party to that agreement. And the ones that don't, it will be in the declarations, and we require those declarations and read them through them before we approve them.
And those get recorded also.
Correct.
Madam Chair? May I suggest we could clarify it by changing the if to where in item 6? So it's where the parking is to be used in common, and then it would be consistent.
That's, through the chair, that's perfectly fine with staff.
That works. Okay, and then one other comment on this is that we saw this on January 4th, and now we're 3 months later, and it seems like that's a delay. If they wanted to get on this for this summer and they've got a 3-month delay, did this hold up their project?
Through the chair, this is holding up their project, yes. There's also a plat involved that on its own is taking its own time, but if this is held up much later, it will hold up their project.
Okay. Was there... We've only had one meeting each in February and March, and I would have met just for this to not hold up a big project.
Through the chair, we can just fix the error and have it signed tonight and just fix the error on that one page.
Yes, it would be common for me to go ahead and sign this tonight, and they'll just change that one word on the one page.
Okay. Good. That's all. Thank you.
So we need a motion then to get this one approved.
Move to approve.
Seconded. Did you get the change with the change? Is there any objection to approving this resolution with that one change on page 5? Hearing none, that is approved. Okay. Next, Ms. Pease, D1B.
Yes, on page 6, under condition 13, there was just, for clarity, we wanted to move the last phrase, with traffic engineering non-motorized transportation coordinator. We wanted to move that up to resolve in the first part of the sentence. So it would read, redesign the parking lot and landscape plan to resolve, insert, with traffic engineering's non-motorized transportation coordinator.
Let's just make sure our secretary gets all of that.
Through the chair, we can do that. And through the chair, if the commission doesn't mind if we make that a cosmetic item too, we can fix it on that page and go ahead and have a sign tonight.
Okay. Do you have all those words? Okay. A motion, please, Ms. Pease?
With that change, I move to approve 2010-002 in its final form.
And a second? We don't have buttons pushed, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Is there any objection? Hearing none, that is approved. D1C, Ms. Pease.
Yes, Madam Chair. On page 3, there's just a sentence that got put in the wrong place. It's 3D, the last sentence, which reads, amend condition 8. It needs to be deleted, and condition 8 was amended appropriately.
Okay. Well, a motion would be in order. Thank you, Ms. Pease and Mr. Isham.
Madam Chair, I move to approve 2010-004 in its final form as we just amended it.
Okay. Any objection? Hearing none, that is approved. And that we are now finished with the consent agenda, and we have postponed item E1 until next Monday, which will be April 12th. And the item that we're going to hear next is G6, which is down quite a ways in our packet, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned, as I announced earlier, G1 and G2 have been postponed. G1 indefinitely and G2 until next week, next Monday, April 12th. Case G6 is case number 2010-033. It's an ordinance amending the buffer landscape requirements for child care facilities. Could we have the staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This, in 2006, the Assembly approved new development standards for child care centers and child care homes. The difference between the two types of facilities is that a child care center is for child care with 9 or more children in care at one time. And at the time that ordinance was adopted, it required enhanced landscaping for child care facilities. These facilities are frequently larger structures and not in a residential neighborhood or area as are child care homes. Usually child care homes are literally run out of a home. Among these requirements, buffer landscaping is required to be planted along the length of each lot line, which abuts a lot within a residential district. Since this has been adopted over the past several years, it has been brought to the Department's attention that this requirement for buffer landscaping along all lot lines adjoining a residentially zoned lot is onerous and, on occasion, unnecessary. The initial reason for that requirement was to provide for visual buffering and sound attenuation on many lots. They're usually smaller lots in size. But what has come about is these developments have occurred in commercial areas where the back or part of the structure may abut residential, but it's child care centers going into existing buildings. So these situations have been brought to our attention. There are pre-constructed buildings that were built by right, being retrofitted for child care. And this becomes especially onerous when the child care use is only in a smaller portion of the structure, and it's much smaller than the other uses there, and frequently, because of the lot size and how the buildings are laid out, there's no room at all for the buffer landscaping to be placed around the structure. That's not quite the case with the new structure. With the new structure, it can be built, to fit the code, so that the building could fit in there. But what it would do with larger sites, we've had a couple cases come forward that Health and Human Services has brought forward to us where somebody was to build a new child care center on a lot, and they were surrounded on several sides by residential, and the child care was nowhere near those sides of the lots. And so it was a lot of landscaping that they felt was unnecessary in those cases. The new language as proposed would allow an alternative landscape plan or fencing plan to be approved by the planning director, providing that that plan provides for sufficient buffering of adjacent uses, or that the petitioner can show that the landscaping is unnecessary due to the lot size in relation to the child care center use. This is similar in language in our Title 21 rewrite, and where certain situations where the director has the authority to amend the requirement on a case-by-case basis, and the draft ordinance as written has been placed in front of you. We do not have written comments from Health and Human Services, but we have discussed it with them at length, and they are in support of this. Thank you.
Are there questions of staff at this time? Or do you wish to hold them until after the hearing? Okay. Seeing none, I will go ahead and open the hearing at this time, and I'll announce the Commission's rules. Petitioners are allowed 10 minutes for the presentation. In this instance, the municipality was a petitioner. If you're representing a group or an organization, you're allowed 5 minutes. And if you are representing yourself, just speaking as an individual, you're allowed 3 minutes time. And when you come forward, if you could just please state your name for the record into the microphone so the secretary is able to correctly record your name in our minutes. We would appreciate that. And having said that, the hearing is open, and anyone that would like to testify on this matter is invited to come forward.
Madam Chair and ladies and gentlemen of the Planning and Zoning Commission, thank you very much for the privilege of allowing us to present to you here tonight. My name is Richard Irwin, and the senior pastor of Anchorage City Church, and beside me is Mary Ellen Fritz, the founder and director of the Anchorage Vineyard Family Resource Center and the Vineyard Early Child Learning Center. Each of you should have a copy of this statement, and we're handing them out to you now. And also included with that is an aerial view of the property of the Anchorage City Church, which is located on the corner of 100th and Minnesota. Anchorage City Church is currently involved in several ways of assisting people in the Anchorage community, and just a few of the examples of things that we are involved in doing is that we currently provide for people in the community groceries for about 450 people a month. In our facility, we operate a high school completion program called the New Direction Resource Center. We're at max capacity, and we have a waiting list that's been very successful. We operate a ministry to homeless single mothers and children called Beacon Hill on another piece of land in the city here. And we have, is currently full, and we have a wait list for that as well, doing very well. At Mayor Sullivan's request to participate in the Mayor's Homeless Task Force, City Church has stepped up to offer its facilities as an emergency cold weather shelter as well. And those issues are being worked through currently. We have met all the licensing requirements to open the Vineyard Early Learning Center. It's a preschool and child care center that prioritizes services for low-income families and provides training and marketable job skill development for families in poverty. Near the end of our process of licensing the preschool, we discovered that landscaping requirements were a problem for us. As you can see by the aerial photograph, we are surrounded by trees and natural landscaping, not to mention lots of mosquitoes. And the existing code would require that our church provide a landscape buffer that would be extremely costly around our entire property, especially in light of the probability of this area not being developed anytime in the foreseeable future. We are here to support the amendment of the Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 21.545.310H.2, regarding the buffer landscaping requirements for child care centers. The proposed amendment provides an allowance for the planning director to approve an alternative landscaping or fencing plan for the sufficient buffering of adjacent uses or make the determination that landscaping is unnecessary due to the lot size in relationship to the use. For our situation, if this amendment is approved, it would remove the barrier that we're experiencing in opening our child care center. And we are humbly asking for your approval of this amendment. As a side note, I want to say here before I close that we are very grateful for the staff. They have been outstanding in helping us walk through this process and understand the process, and our hat is off to them. They have been stellar to work with. We appreciate them very much. And we want to say thank you for allowing us to speak to this here tonight. Any questions?
Okay, are there questions from the commission? Mr. Weddleton.
If you open a child care center, about what percentage of your square footage would be devoted to that? Rough idea.
Well, it's certainly less than 10% of our building currently. I don't know what the exact square footage is right off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Isham.
Pastor Irvin, if let's just make some assumptions that, let's say your Tract B had a bunch of houses that were backed up on it, would you be coming asking for this relief if that were the case, or would you have gone ahead and put in the required buffering?
We would work with you in terms of city, whatever the staff, whatever you thought was best in this situation.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions from commissioners? I don't see anyone else in the queue, but thank you for coming out. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this matter? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, I'll close the hearing and the matter rests with the commission. Ms. Pease, and it's been seconded by Mr. Weddleton.
Madam Chair, may I ask this question of staff before I make the motion?
Yes.
Through the chair. With regard to H2, the last sentence says that if landscaping is unnecessary due to the lot size in relation to the use. And I had to think for a second, are we talking large lot or small lot? I wondered if staff would consider clarifying that with some change to the effect is unnecessary because the lot size is sufficiently large in relation to the use that it will not create a high impact at the lot perimeters.
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'll make a motion then.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Okay. I guess it also concerns H2, and it identifies as the only rationale for this particular requirement to be waived as being the lot size. Is there any other reason for it being waived other than lot size?
Through the chair, yes, it's the primary problem has not been the individuals that just spoke up were the latest of many who have had the same problem. A lot of the problem has been either in strip malls where there's absolutely they're not a large lot like the petitioners. They're a small lot. There's just no room for them. You know, they may even meet current Title 21 requirements with parking lot landscaping, parking lot perimeter landscaping. They just can't meet. You know, they don't occupy the whole building and they can't meet the requirement. there's also the situation where it's just a 6,000 square foot lot, and the more that you take up, the more of the property that you take up with additional landscaping or additional other requirements, it's kind of harder to fit it onto the site. So it's not necessarily related to lot size as much as existing building location.
If that's the case, wouldn't you think we'd have to change the wording to accommodate those concepts?
That is possible, but
It would seem that other requirements of Title 21 would be also a consideration.
well, except for that, through the chair, the intent was that child care centers not be treated any differently than other facilities, adult care, other things like that, and they move into a building that meets all the requirements, or they have to come into compliance. This is a special requirement that is rarely required in our current code of any other use. Even when we did that ordinance with child care centers, we were dealing with assisted living and a whole bunch of other health care related facilities at the same time. And this was one of the only uses that had this requirement placed on it. And so the department had felt it was so important for them to meet all the parking lot requirements and all the other landscaping perimeter requirements that were necessary. The only one that has come to our attention since 2006 when this was adopted is buffer landscaping adjacent to a residential district.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton, do you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
Now, could someone with that problem just come in and ask for a variance?
Through the chair, yes, and they have. One had two parts of a variance request, two areas of landscaping. One area was granted, one part was not, and that was because they were given a permit to build in error. And a second one came in and was not granted a variance.
So why not just go through that fairly typical procedure then in cases like this?
The rationale is because, as I had said, this was a larger, a more intense landscaping requirement for the type, considering the type of use. These are usually smaller uses that go into existing structures, not always, but usually, frequently, I should say. And because the standards for variance are very stringent, there's 7 standards, most of which have to do with specific problems of the lands, such as the topography, wetlands, and other things that make a building so onerous, that you couldn't build without getting the variance. Well, that wouldn't really apply to the buffer landscaping. It'd be pretty much impossible to meet most of those 7 standards on a variance. So even though technically one could be granted, in reality, it's impossible to meet those standards. So they have to do special conditions of the land, and most of these, like I said, are strip malls or they're existing churches that are sited on very, very large lots, and they're related to lot size or existing structural location.
I have 2 more parts if no one else is in the queue.
Finish them up quick.
Okay.
And I want to just give everybody a chance, and then we're going to have a motion.
Well, I'd emailed Ms. Chambers a suggestion, and one was to say that if the child care is not the primary use of the structure or structures on the lot, that the planning director would have the discretion that you're asking for. And is that sufficient? Would that work?
Through the chair, for the majority of the situations that I have seen, that would be more than sufficient. The ones that have come forward for variances were new construction. So your wording would take care of the vast majority of problems that we've seen.
So then the other point in that email was that the discussion of the transition space in 2145.200 that was mentioned would handle issues with a large lot. My reading of that is that there's plenty of transition space around this city church.
2145-200 is transition and buffering standards, I believe. Oh, the general standards. Let me pull those up real quick. $2145-200 would only apply if someone was coming before the commission for a site plan or a conditional use or a certain type of review. Any administrative or building permit thing would never see the standards of 2145-200 under current code. But the wording for existing, to make this be a requirement for existing buildings, as well as the wording that Mr. Phelps put forward, is acceptable to the department.
Okay.
Okay. Did that take care of your two questions?
If that took care of a question, at some point I'd offer an amendment to the
Well,
wording here.
I don't
can
have a motion yet.
Oh, we don't? Thought we
No.
had a motion.
Madam Chair.
Well, just a minute. I have one more person in the queue who hasn't asked his question, and that's Mr. Isham.
Yes, Ms. Chambers, would an alternative to the planning director making this determination would be perhaps a non-public hearing site plan review that we would look at? Is that an alternative?
Through the chair, yes, it would be an alternative. It would be an expensive alternative. It would be over $3,000 for the petitioner to come forward as a non-mailed site plan review. Again, very onerous for most of these smaller child care facilities. Some of the larger ones could maybe afford that. The reason why we made it for the planning director was because we would look at issues of where the child care play area was. As I said, most of these are for existing construction, so we would look at where the outdoor child play area is, look at issues of noise attenuation, and we would look at and see if there was a need where we could add some additional landscaping to buffer the view shed to the residential lots. It would be a very site-specific situational item, so bringing it to the body, to this body, wouldn't necessarily get anything more out of just having staff review it.
Okay, and just a follow-up question. If somebody objected to something like this, whether it was a non-public site hearing or whether it was going directly to the director, would they be possible to make their objections known in any way?
Through the chair, they would appeal the denial of a building permit to the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals.
So they'd have to appeal it. In other words, they couldn't do anything until the decision was made.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, Ms. Pease.
Yes, Madam Chair. I move for approval of ordinance 2010-033 with the following change to item H2. The paragraph will read as it is currently: buffer landscaping as described in section 2145-125C2 shall be planted along the length of each lot line which abuts a lot within a residential district. Then I would put in a period. Then I would insert new words. If the child care center is on a site where it is not the primary use, comma, strike the word unless, then continue, the planning director, insert may, determine that an alternative landscape or fencing plan allows for sufficient buffering of adjacent uses, or that landscaping is unnecessary, and then strike the due to, put in because the lot size, insert is sufficiently large in relation to the use, and then insert that it will not create a high impact at the lot perimeter abutting the residential district. And I can read that all the way through as an entire sentence, if you would like me to.
Did the chair, I've got it.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Weddleton, are you in the queue as a second, or did you just forget to take it out?
No, I believe I seconded that, and that.
Okay. Would you care to speak to your motion, Ms. Pease?
Yes, child care is an absolutely essential service for the well-being of our economy and our families in Anchorage. We frequently hear that quality child care is expensive and hard to find. At the same token, we recognize that child care can be a fairly intensive use, including outdoor intensive activity. I think this ordinance strikes a good balance by enabling additional sites to host child care centers with a little bit of latitude as to the buffering, so that child care centers can be secondary or ancillary use on a site without requiring a huge amount of buffing where it probably is not needed. And the planning director is placed in charge of making that determination. So there will be a review at that level when these situations come forth.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, that motion passes. And our action reflects a recommendation, and our recommendation will be sent forward to the Assembly. And they're the party that takes the final action, and you have to watch what form it looks like when it comes out of that body. Okay? At this time, before we proceed on our agenda, there are a couple of West High students that have been sitting patiently in the back of the room. I would like to invite the West High students to come forward to get their agendas signed. They've been waiting patiently. You've got to see a variety of the types of matters we deal with. Someday it might be you sitting here taking care of the public's business. And we can all be home playing on our Nintendo Wiis or whatever the current technological
They don't leave
invention
as soon as they
is.
get a signature, do they?
Huh?
They don't leave just now that they get a signature, do they?
Yes.
Not going to stick it out?
Oh, they stuck it out 15 minutes longer than they were required to, 20 minutes longer to. But we needed to be at a breaking spot before we interrupted. Okay, I'm going to bring up the subject now that Mr. Davis mentioned on if we wanted to entertain the notion of holding the quick public hearings on G7 and G8 before we moved on to the other agenda items. I'm just offering that as a suggestion. Is there anyone here to testify on G7, which is the case order amending the municipal code, and this has to do with the wind energy conversion systems?
I think one just walked in the door.
Are you here for the wind energy? Okay. If you're here to testify, and I just wanted to know who is here. Anybody else for wind energy? Is there anyone here for the site condo design requirements? Anybody at all? No. Well. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking for some guidance, but do we want to make the gentleman that's here for wind energy sit till the end of the agenda to testify?
Well, everybody else has got to wait then, so I would suggest we just follow the sequence.
You're cruel, Mr. Aisha.
Now, if I understand it, the goal is that then our Title 21 staff doesn't have to sit through this
That's
whole meeting
correct,
and the next one.
Because we're paying a lot of overtime.
Can we have the public hearing, close the public hearing,
Yes.
postpone deliberation, and Commissioner Yoshimura can listen to the tapes?
That's correct.
And we've got 2 people, so that's 6
And
minutes.
we can do that with both hearings.
I would move to reorder the day, if that's what we're doing, so that wind energy conversion system comes next. Then the public hearing for the site condos.
Okay?
Period.
And Mr. Frederick seconded. Is there any objection? Hearing none, this shouldn't take long at all. The next case before us is case number 2010-38. It is an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code sections 2135020, and then there's several others that's cited, and this has to do with wind energy conversion systems. Could we have the staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Commissioners may recall in 2008, the original wind energy conversion systems ordinance was brought forward to the Commission. The Commission did recommend adopting the ordinance with a number of amendments. The ordinance at that time then went forward to the Title 21 Assembly Subcommittee, and the subcommittee raised several issues with the concept of wind energy conversion systems, particularly in residential areas, and directed planning staff to make changes but really focus on the other parts of Title 21 first. Now, a year and a half later, we've been directed to actually make those changes, and due to the significance of the changes and the time delay, we are bringing it back to the Commission. The major changes are increasing the minimum lot size that allows a freestanding wind energy conversion system on a residential lot from 20,000 square feet to 40,000 square feet. It also eliminates the requirement that the wind system be placed in the backyard, which does allow a little bit more flexibility, although the setback requirements will still tend to require the system to be more centrally located to a lot. It also clarifies kind of what is generally, or how it generally works in the industry, that small wind systems that are put onto residential lots tend to have a very low kilowatt power of, usually we're talking 1.5 to 3. So it limits small wind systems on residential lots to less than 10 kilowatts, while allowing them on non-residential lots up to 25 kilowatts. Those are the changes that were made in the last year and a half, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay. Are there questions of staff at this time? Apparently not. I will open the public hearing and invite anyone that would like to testify on this ordinance to come forward. Sir? Can you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Kirk Garut, and I am a proud owner of 2 wind turbines in the municipality of Anchorage.
Can you spell your last name for us, please?
Garoutte.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
All right. Well, I'm an employer of Alaskans. I own Susitna Energy Systems. We're a small alternative energy supplier for the state, and we hope to be the world someday. But right at the moment, we have 2 small wind energy conversion systems, as we call them here in Anchorage. They're located on Fairbank Street, a couple blocks from here. I don't know if all of you have seen them or not, but I have business property there, and it took quite an effort to get an approval through the building department to get them put in, but finally, after trying for quite a while, we got an approval, and we got them up the day it froze. They're for demonstration purposes. We use them to educate our customers across the state that is not encumbered by the regulations that the municipality here has. The municipality of Anchorage, basically 45% of the population of this state comes from the municipality of Anchorage, and I'm talking between Portage and Eklutna. You are not allowed, under Title 21 provisions at present, to do anything with wind until this is either approved or moved to the Assembly for final vote. And I just find that kind of ironic that, you know, the great state of Alaska, we have the best wind resource of almost any state. 42 other states have net metering laws, but the state of Alaska doesn't. Notwithstanding this panel, but the folks on the Assembly are the last block hurdle for public citizens like myself to actually help themselves with the resources that we have available every day. I have solar hot water on my building. I've seen a tremendous decrease in the amount of natural gas I use because I don't heat my hot water anymore with natural gas. I use sunshine. And I'm trying to use the wind to power part of our load. I've been to these meetings at the other forums where the utilities have stood up and said, we'll plan for rolling blackouts, plan for natural gas shortages, plan for, you know, bad things to happen because honestly, the powers that be haven't taken up that much time to deal with it. But we can't help ourselves without this.
Okay. Looks like we have some questions for you, Mr. Weddleton.
I have a question. I'd also like to make a brief disclosure. I've known Mr. Grote for a number of years, and the warehouse, or location, he bought that warehouse from me. But question now, so you have 2 wind turbines up, but they're not, how is that allowed given that they're not allowed yet?
Well, they're not allowed on residential lots because of Title 21, but evidently they are allowed on industrial or business lots with permit. I applied for a permit and I was denied originally. I kept talking to people and finally Mayor Sullivan and a couple of his representatives, I got through to them and talked to them and they agreed that, something should be done to allow or at least experiment with this. And they afforded me the opportunity to put up 2. I have one on a 60-foot tower that is a monopole, and I have one on a 45-foot tilt-up tower that we use for teaching purposes. We bring people from the villages in, and we go through classes, and we're offering that for all the rural customers that we have, University of Alaska, and we're pursuing doing an educational school for alternative energies, and it'll be right here on Fairbank Street.
Now, in this ordinance that we have in front of us, have you read, this is different than the one we did last year?
I honestly was handed it a few minutes ago. I didn't know about the amendments, but I think maybe you can recall that I think I was the only person that testified last time on wind energy systems.
This one puts a cap on them at, for kind of a home use one, or I think even small commercial at 25 kilowatt. And then there's a gap, and above 100 it could be a utility wax. Would a cap at 25 restrict the market, or is that plenty big for
I
most
think a
people?
cap at 25 is more than reasonable for a homeowner, personally.
Okay.
If you have a large-scale business and you want to do grid solar or things like that, 25 kW is a pretty good chunk of electricity.
Okay.
And a 25 kW wind turbine would be rather large for a residential neighborhood, but they're pretty common at the 10 kW size. Even the 15 kW size are pretty normal for a large home, and probably some of the customers that we'd see up on the hillside or along the bluff of Cook Inlet.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Frederick.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, thanks. I just wanted to be clear, and I think your interaction with Mr. Weddleton answered my question, that you're generally in favor of this ordinance. Is that?
I am, sir. I think that being a consumer, supporting the infrastructure that we do with Chugach Electric and the City of Anchorage's ML&P, I don't know if you're aware, but every month that you pay a utility bill, you have a customer charge there. You're paying to support that infrastructure. And the federal government recognized in 1973 that you should have a right to use it. And I believe that it would be a good thing for residents to be able to help themselves and reduce our energy footprint, reduce our carbon footprint, and relieve some of these utilities of all the control that they have on us.
All right, great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Isham.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Just basically, there's about four main things that this ordinance changes. Number one, it reduces the small wicks permitted on residential lots to no greater than 10 kilowatts. Is that okay with you?
That's 25.
No, reduces small. That's what it says, to no greater than 10 kW.
A 10 kW wind turbine would be a pretty good size wind turbine for a home, actually.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd agree to 10K being the maximum. I thought it was 25K.
Okay, 25K is on lots non-residential.
Non-residential?
Yeah, so residential lots is limited to 10 kW, non-residential lots 25 kW.
Okay.
Okay, and then it increases the minimum lot size for small freestanding WECs to 40,000 square feet. No, there's almost an acre rather than a half an acre like it used to be. And then it eliminates the requirement of freestanding WECs to be placed in the backyard. You can basically put it where the distances match up.
Yes, sir. I don't think I have any objections to those at all.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Okay. There are no further questions for you at this time. Thank you for coming out this evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this ordinance? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, I will close the hearing. What is the wish of the commission? Mr. Weddleton?
Well, I'd move to postpone deliberation until April 15th.
15th or 12th?
12th, I'm sorry. Yes, the
Okay.
12th.
You've got taxes on your brain, Mr. Weddleton.
Couple,
April 12th, and Mr. Isham seconded that. Is there any objection? Hearing none. Postpone to 4/12, and save your packets on all these things we're postponing. Save your packets, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. The next item before us would be then G8, which is 2010-037. This is the proposed site condo design requirements. Could we have a brief staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to make a more extensive staff presentation next week, assuming that you do postpone your deliberations. This was a follow-up item that was originally included in the second packet of follow-up items that you first started looking at in January, and at that time you requested that this be pulled and looked at separately as a new agenda item. You also asked that we specifically send this information to various groups and organizations that we've been working closely with through the Title 21 rewrite process, and we have done so. It was also noticed again, meaning that it was specifically sent to the community councils as a separate agenda item. And we had some comments from the traffic department, and that was it. This is attempting to address design standards for multiple residential structures on a single lot. Some communities do not allow multiple residential structures on a single lot. Other communities regulate them through a process that's similar to our planned unit development process, the PUD. We had mentioned to you that we were going to explore that option, and as we explored it, this is basically what we came up with. It is extremely flexible, and it leaves a lot of it proposes to leave a lot of discretionary power into the hands of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that is basically because we could not find examples of, nor were we able to develop standards that worked in every situation that we could think of, both for small situations and large situations. And so instead we talked more about the intent of what the community wants out of the development, and proposed to leave it to the commission to judge whether or not the proposal meets those intent statements. There is a tiered approval process. Smaller projects would go through an administrative site plan review, medium-sized projects would go through a major site plan review, and larger projects would go through a conditional use. I believe that's all I have.
Okay. I will go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone that would like to testify on this matter? Anyone at all? This is the site condo public hearing. Seeing and hearing no one, I will close the public hearing. What is the wish of the commission? I see Mr. Isham has made a motion and seconded by Mr. Frederick and Mr. Isham.
Madam Chair, I move to postpone deliberation on this until the 12th of April.
And as I said, Mr. Frederick has seconded it. Any discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, that is postponed until the April 12th, which is next Monday night. And the public hearing is closed. Okay, now going back to our regular business on the agenda, which is, we're now back to item G3, case number S11797. Which is a plat for and in the Canick Heights West Addition to Canick Heights subdivision. Could we have the staff presentation, please?
Madam Chair, this is a very simple subdivision of 2 lots into 2 different lots, and that's to provide a common access off of Elmore Road to the 2 lots. Chugach Electric wants to retain the electrical substation at that corner, and AWU wants the south lot so that they can build a water reservoir. The department recommends approval of this plat, subject to conditions 1 through 6 on pages 4 and 5, with the following 2 changes that I'll make right now. The first change is on page 5 of the packet, plat note C. I'd like to change the word creek to drainage way. So on the second line from the bottom, it says removal from the ordinary high water mark of the creek. That would be changed to drainage way, and provide a statement on the plot plan that this requirement was completed. It was just an error to put creek because it's actually classified as a drainage way. And then we wanted to add a brand new plat note D, which would state driveways to Huffman Road shall be approved by the State of Alaska Department of Transportation. So I'll read that again. New plat note D, driveways to Huffman Road shall be approved by the State of Alaska Department of Transportation. And the reason for that is that Chugach Electric wants to retain a driveway to Huffman Road, the state road, and they would have to go through the driveway permitting process with the State Department of Transportation. They believe that they need to retain that driveway for very infrequent service to the electrical substation that they need access through their trucks from that road. Normally, we would try and discourage access to Huffman Road because of its road classification, but this is a special circumstance. And so DOT wasn't able to make the decision now. They do it through their normal permitting process. So when a plat note like this is on the plat, then when there's a change of use or a replat, then DOT would review that driveway and see if it still needs to be there or not. The applicant, the petitioner in this case, has no objection to either of those changes. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. One other thing that a conditional use, the next case on the agenda is to deal with the water reservoir conditional use permit, that AWU, for the southern lot. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there questions of staff at this time? Ms. Pease?
I had a question. Sometimes we hear the two cases concurrently. We didn't in this case. If I were interested in asking questions or proposing a vegetative screening easement, would that need to go on the plat as opposed to the site plan?
If it relates to the site that the water AWWU facility is going to be on, it would be related to that. We're just dealing with a plat now.
Thank you. I have nothing
without regard to use.
Further.
Okay. All right. Seeing no further questions of the Commission, the public hearing is open, and would the petitioner's representative come forward, please? Is there anybody here for the petitioner? And at this time, we're addressing just the plat. Yeah.
Understood.
Okay.
I'm Bruce Robeson. That's R-O-B-S-O-N.
Okay.
I'm here representing the Anchorage Water Wastewater Utility. I'm with the firm of MWH. Also in conjunction with me tonight is Mr. Dave Hale with R&M Consultants. And we also have Mr. Steve Nuss with the utility here, should you desire just questions of the utility. So.
Okay. Even though Chugach Electric is the petitioner in this case.
That's correct.
Okay.
The Water Wastewater Utilities obtained permission from Chugach Electric to represent them for this plating.
For this plat.
The utility is the one desiring to proceed with this. So.
Okay. Do you wish to reserve any of your time for rebuttal?
I do. I don't know how much detail the commission would like to go into this. I think it's fairly straightforward. Additionally, you have a lot of information on the follow-on case, too.
Okay, yeah, we're just dealing with the plat now, so we don't need details about the next case.
Yes.
How much time do you want to reserve? This is when we give you a notice to...
I understand.
Yeah.
As far as we're concerned, we can reserve the entire time. We don't need to get into a lot of detail, other than the fact that the subdivision is being requested by the utility through Chevy Electric, and the reasons for it are for a water reservoir. So.
Okay. All right, if you don't have a specific presentation, maybe we'll just go to questions from commissioners then. Mr. Weddleton?
One question is, this is a fairly large lot for what Chugach Electric has going on there now. Did they get a large lot so that they could expand? And would this make it harder for them to expand in the future?
I can't speak as to what their future plans were there. My understanding is originally I think they had an intent of some expansion, but I believe their facility at Rabbit Creek Road took care of that.
Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions of the petitioner? Apparently not. You're giving off easy. Okay. So there are no further questions for you, so you can sit down. Is there anyone else that would like to testify in this matter? Anyone at all? Yes, sir. Please come forward. You do have some additional rebuttal time that I will call you back up for after this. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Tim Stevens. I live at 12400 Elmore Road, right across the Elmore Road from this proposed subdivision of this lot, or two lots. I would like to add two plat notes as well. One is to retain the existing vegetative buffer on the west side of the expanded Lot 1. That would shield the traffic on Elmore Road and the residential properties to the west from this electrical subdivision. The second plat note that I would like to add is if they have a common driveway, which is what I read when I look at the plat, that would enter onto Elmore Road, I ask that that be gated to keep the public from out of that parcel. This is needed for safety reasons as well as just general traffic patterns. And that's it.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton has a question for you.
So a vegetative buffer on the west side of the whole, both what will be two lots?
Well, right now we're just dealing with the expanded lot of the utility.
Is that buffer now?
Yes, there is a considerable mature vegetative buffer there now. I would ask that that be retained in its entirety.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Ms. Pease.
Yes, Mr. Stevens, I'm familiar with the site and just wanted you to verify for the record. If I recall, the residences on the west side of Elmore Road, which are across Elmore Road from this proposed site, are up on a grade above the road a little bit. The Elmore Road slopes up there.
That's correct.
So you'd be looking either across or possibly even down at.
That's correct. If that vegetative buffer was to be removed, that electrical utility would be fully exposed to our property, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Isham.
I assume that you don't object to the vegetative buffer being removed where a road access has to go in and where you want that gate.
That driveway is already there.
Already there, okay.
Okay. Seeing no further questions for you, thank you very much for your testimony. Is there anyone else that would like to testify in this matter? Anyone else at all? Seeing and hearing no one, close the public hearing and the matter rests with the commission. Oh, rebuttal. Sorry. Thank you, guys. I'm getting it in stereo. Yes, Mr. Robeson. You have some rebuttal time. My apologies.
Thank you. I'll take the gate issue first. We'll have to work with Chugach Electric on the gate. I think there is a preference that there not be a gate there at this point in time. We've discussed that with Chugach Electric. I do not know their specific and particular reasons for that. The intent is to have that driveway as a joint use. We'd enter into a joint use agreement with the municipality on that, as well as with Chugach Electric, at least the utility would. And the utility also intends to gate their access to their facility, though. So.
When you speak of the utility, which utility?
The water, wastewater utility.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Do you have any comments on the 2 additional plat notes that Mr. Stevens mentioned?
Well, one I believe was relevant to the gate, if I'm not incorrect.
Yes, and the other one had to do with the vegetative buffer on the west.
I would like to first ask for some clarity from the Commission as to the complete interpretation of the buffer that Mr. Stevens is talking about. I interpret that from the substation screening.
I don't know. Maybe perhaps Mr. McLaughlin can weigh in.
Through the chair, this is new information for us, so I'm just trying to think about this on the fly. The gate and the common driveway, that would be better dealt with as a condition of approval on the water reservoir conditional use permit. It wouldn't be appropriate as a plat note on the plat. The retaining existing vegetation on the west side of the northern lot, that would be done through a landscape easement. So you would require the petitioner to dedicate a 10-foot buffer landscape easement along the west boundary of lot 1A-2. I'm sorry, it would be the north lot. It'd be lot 1A-1. However, so you would require dedication of a landscape easement and allow for the existing vegetation to meet the requirements of that landscape easement. However, there's nothing in the subdivision regulations to require such a landscape easement. So if this were to be heard as a short plat, or if this were to be heard in front of the planning board, I think that they would look really critically at where the authority, where the requirement would come from for for subdivisions, which is very prescriptive. Conditional use permit is a little bit, there's more latitude from which to require exactions and dedications. But the subdivision regulations don't require such a requirement. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. And the next case doesn't deal with that proposed lot 1A-1 territory.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Anything further in your rebuttal, Mr. Robson?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, the hearing is really closed. Did you have anything further, Mr. McLaughlin?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Ms. Fees?
Yes, through the chair, Mr. McLaughlin worded that as a 10-foot wide buffer and also as a buffer only on lot 1A1, which is the northern lot. And I didn't quite understand that since it's the southern lot that's being more intensively developed. And I also didn't know where the 10 feet came from. This is an R6 lot, so normally there would be a setback of 50 feet on the front. Mm-hmm. So the 10 feet is a question, and then finally the practicality of a 10-foot buffer. As you look at the air photo, not sure what 10 feet preserves. It appears to be cleared back from the right-of-way a little bit.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Ms. Pease. So what I understood the person from the public to say was that he wanted the natural vegetation on the northern lot, the utility substation, to be preserved on the west side that is facing Elmore Road. That's what I understood, and I may be incorrect. So my comments were in relation to that. In terms of the southern lot where the water reservoir, your next case, you'll be hearing a water reservoir conditional use permit, a final conditional use permit, and you will be discussing landscaping on all four sides of that lot, buffering residences from this water tank use. And you'll also be looking at, the site and the elevation of the water tank being, partially, buried into the ground. And so you can sort of deal with landscaping and whatever sort of landscape requirements meet the intent of a conditional use permit in terms of protection of those neighboring residences. Now, so the conditional use permit, you have a lot of latitude to do what you think is appropriate. The northern lot, the utility substation, they're being sort of severed, there's this new lot line that's dividing that off. And so that will not be a part of any conditional use permit. That is strictly being treated with this case, which is before you now, and not the next one, okay? So with a subdivision, what you do is you dedicate landscape easements, and then you require the petitioner to enter into a subdivision agreement to install landscaping. So you first require dedication of landscape easements, and then you require landscaping to be installed. In this case, you could require the dedication of a landscape easement and then not require them to enter into a subdivision agreement to install landscaping because it appears that there's sufficient landscaping there, okay? But what I was saying is that there's nothing in the subdivision or in regulations to empower you to dedicate any sort of easement. But if you still did dedicate a landscape easement, we have the rules. We have the buffer landscaping, we have the highway screening landscaping. So I was referring to a specific landscape standard. So you could, require the dedication of I'd have to go to it, but an 8-foot buffer landscaping easement or a 10-foot transitional buffer landscape easement. But we would have to pick a specific landscape easement to refer to. 50-foot landscape easement doesn't exist. I'd be happy to answer any more questions on that.
I think that in some way this is kind of a non-issue on that western boundary. There's already a recorded Chugach Electric right-of-way easement of record that's shown here on this preliminary plat. There's another utility 10-foot utility easement, and it goes all along. It looks like the southern end all along the southern end up by Huffman, but then on that western side, it goes down well over halfway through that proposed Lot 1A-1. There are utility easements there already. And tonight, we're not dealing with any proposed development, anything to do with that northern lot that's being created. The next case is going to deal with the lot to the south. All we're doing is creating two different lots. It's kind of a housekeeping thing. Okay, let's see who else is in the queue. Mr. Weddleton, you have some follow-up?
Well, question, we heard that we don't have the authority to require landscape easement, so that means we can't do it, really.
Right.
That's correct.
I think we can't. I think that it's none of our business, quite frankly. Yes.
I just wanted to say that in approving, this is a plat, no, this is not the conditional use.
No.
Okay.
No, it has nothing to do with the conditional use.
I think that we heard Mr. Francis, Mr. McLaughlin say that we do have some latitude when we do a plat. When we act as the platting authority, I think we're allowed to provide for a configuration that is ensures compatibility with the neighborhood and transportation access and all that sort of thing. So I think we have general platting authority in this case, and that can include an easement.
Okay, Mr. McLaughlin.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to speak to that question. The subdivision regulations don't require any landscape easement dedication on that lot. If the planning board was reviewing this or the planning department, we'd have no authority to require the dedication of an easement. It's the planning department's view that this is simple subdivision and that it wouldn't be appropriate to dedicate landscape easement either overlapping or in addition to those other utility easements. Other commissioners that have served on the planning board and have had experience with these types of plats recently could speak to that.
Mm-hmm. And never mind. Mr. Phelps.
But the point you're making is that there is the authority in the conditional use process because there is fairly substantial discretionary authority associated with that. That's correct, right?
Yes, Mr. Phelps.
I think it's time for a motion.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Eicher.
Move for approval in case number S11797-1, Knick Heights subdivision, West Addition lots 1A1 and 1A2, to subdivide the two lots into two different lots. And I move for approval subject to the department recommendations on page 4 and 5 with the following changes. Under 6C, third line, delete creek and add drainage way, and add an additional condition, 6D, that would read driveways to Huffman Road shall be approved by DOT and PF.
And that was seconded by Ms. Dean. Would you please speak to your motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe that this truly is kind of a housekeeping thing. We're changing the northern lot, we're making it bigger, and the southern lot, we're making it smaller. And I believe that we can deal with the concerns about buffering and so forth when we deal with what wants to be done in the following in the next case that we're going to be hearing, if we so decide that's appropriate.
Okay. Any further discussion? Ms. Pease.
Yes, Madam Chair. I do want to note for the record that we did hear from a neighbor who has concerns about his desire for vegetative screening on the west side of the proposed Lot 1A1. We feel that it is within our authority as a platting body, hearing a conditional use, to provide that screening. But there is some question as to how that would be done, since there's already a utility easement of 10 feet along the west buffer. I'm also not inclined to try to apply that or dedicate that easement here, because the lot is still generously sized compared to the existing use, and I'm going to go under the assumption that an expansion of Chugach's use would require some sort of a site plan review, and screening easements would be dealt with at that time.
Okay. Any further discussion? I will just add a brief comment. I consider the issue regarding landscaping on the proposed lot 1A1 to be moot, in that there are already there's already an existing utility easement at that location and an additional proposed one by virtue of this new plat. And certainly the existing utility easement would supersede any rights of a landscaping easement that would go on top of it. And if for some reason the utility needs to dig up that space to do some sort of repairs, they might have to do that, and that would be a clear conflict. So anyway, I'm going to support the plat. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, that is approved. Now we will move on, Emma, to the next case, which is G4. Does anybody want to take a short break before we do G4? I'm seeing some heads nod gently. Okay. And you may have some materials you want to set up. So we're going to just take a brief break. There. That took care of it. All right. I'll call the meeting back to order, and the next case before us is case number 2010-040. The petitioner is Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, and the request is for a zoning conditional use for a water reservoir, and it's in the West Addition to Connect Heights Subdivision Lot 1A, Block 1, located south of Huffman Road and east of Elmore Road. Could we have the staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. March 11th of this year, we mailed out 51 public hearing notices for this item. We did not receive anything back in the mail. Did receive numerous phone calls, mostly expressing curiosity. We did get 3 comments back from various individuals, one expressing concern about landscaping, one expressing concern about not being able to review the plans online, and one expressing concern about the view once the water tank would be in place. This is a conditional use application for a 5 million gallon water reservoir. Conditional use is required because the zoning district is R6. There will be a site plan landscaping review by the Urban Design Commission prior to construction of the property, on the property. So any landscaping comments that you might have, I would suggest we put in the form of a recommendation to UDC, and I'll make sure those get to them in ample time. The water tank is to be low profile and will be partially buried to help minimize visual intrusion in the neighborhood. It will also be painted a dark gray. There are some view shed drawings of the proposal once it's installed on pages 137 and 138 of your report, also on pages 158 and 159, and on pages 172 through 185. If approved, the water tank should begin construction early next year and be completed by mid-2012. This case is actually part of a wider program to serve South Anchorage. The 4 elements mentioned in the application are on page 005 under site description and history. The most recent one that the Planning Commission reviewed was a conditional use case in February of last year for the new Golden View Reservoir. The subject property, the south half of the plat you just went through, is undeveloped. It's adjacent to the Chugach Electric Substation. Surrounding properties are all zoned R6 and generally developed as single-family homes. There are no specific conditional use standards for utility substations. So for water reservoirs, pump stations, lift stations, and so forth, we just use the general standards of 2150-020. This site was identified and chosen as part of a lengthy study with public input, considering especially the site elevation, lot size, availability, surrounding development, cost, topography, soils, groundwater, drainage, and proximity to water transmission main lines. AWW will continue to maintain the site and the infrastructure once the project has been completed. As to the standards for conditional use, beginning on page 007, that this furthers the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. The standard is met. This is a utility. This is obviously needed for development to continue in the future. We've identified 7 policies from Anchorage 2020 on page 7 and 8 of the report that support the development of this type utility facility in this general area. Part B of the conditional use application, that the proposal conforms to the standards for the use in the title. For the first part, lot area and width, the minimum lot area in R6 is 1 1/4 acres with a minimum 150-foot width. The site meets those requirements. Use determination, a substation is permitted by conditional use. Yard requirements, the setbacks, the site meets or exceeds all of the R6 minimum requirements. Lot coverage, the maximum allowed is 30%. Parking requirements, this is not a manned substation, so there is no parking requirement, although we have heard some expressions of concern from the public. So if it adds a comfort level, we could ask for a condition for 3 or 4 legally sized, painted, striped parking spaces to be put on the property. I suspect for the most part they will go unused, and I suspect further that when maintenance is on site, there will be parking all over the place. Item C, that this use will be compatible with the existing and planned uses in the surrounding neighborhood. The use is consistent and compatible with the intent of the district. The 2-acre site further is located at a major intersection, and it will be well buffered and well set back from the adjacent residential uses. The draft plan shows a minimum 50-foot setback from all lot lines for the tank. Also, the tank is low in profile, partially built below grade, and painted gray to minimize the visual impact. The specifics, item D, that the proposed use will not have a permanent negative impact greater than anticipated from permitted development. Item 1, pedestrian and vehicular traffic circulation. Obviously, at a major intersection like this, there will be some disruption during construction. The issues of school crossing. There is an elementary school a short distance to the north, and there is the new high school down Elmore to the south. So there is pedestrian traffic affected in this area. We will ask for the applicant to submit a pedestrian and traffic control plan to be approved by the traffic engineer prior to construction beginning. Once the construction is completed, traffic to the site is going to be minimal. The demand for and availability of public services, well, this is a public service, this is a utility, it's not going to add any further demand to the system. It is actually going to alleviate some pressure on other areas of the system. Item 3, that noise, air, water, and other forms of environmental pollution have been addressed. For the most part, drainage and so forth will be addressed during the permitting process. Once the use is in place, there should not be any forms of pollution associated with the use. The use does have to meet noise and air quality standards. There is no backup power generation to this site. The electrical equipment is all on battery backup, and all water in and out of the reservoir is gravity fed. Because the neighbors did express some concern about noise and maintenance, we would offer for your consideration a new condition that hours of operation for normal, non-emergency work be restricted to the hours that we often associate with gravel pits, namely Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Emergency work obviously would be any time of the day or night, any day of the week. And item 4, the maintenance of compatible and efficient development. Well, this is a water tank. It's not a home, and it is in a residential district. But it is compatible and efficient in the sense that it will work with the rest of the South Anchorage system, and it does take some pressure off other portions of the system. Once again, the Urban Design Commission will be reviewing the landscaping. It's not been scheduled, but if you have comments for them, I will be happy to get it to them. The department does recommend approval of the proposal. There are 6 conditions on page 11 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Phelps.
One of the issues here is going to be the amount and kind of landscaping. I noticed that, in fact, there is no landscaping recommendation per se. Rather, what you suggested is that the Urban Design Commission is going to be dealing with this and that they would deal with the issue of landscaping. Is it your feeling from a staff perspective that the Commission does not need to deal with the landscaping issue, rather that the Urban Design Commission has sufficient understanding of the issue? Or would have sufficient understanding of the issue?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Phelps, after their briefing, when it is scheduled, they will have sufficient understanding, yes.
Okay.
So it would basically be redundant if we were to deal with it, since it's basically their jurisdiction.
Except that I'm happy to take any of your comments forward to them, Madam Chair.
Okay, that we could just mention during our discussion after the fact.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any further questions of staff at this time?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Isham?
Yeah, Mr. Barrett, on that condition 4, in effect, then, we're approving the urban design conditions of approval even before they exist.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Isham, in effect, yes, you're adopting them by reference. You did this with the Golden View water tank a year and 2 months ago, same condition.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Pease?
Yes, 2 questions. And sorry, I don't know the answer to this, but does the Urban Design Commission have the authority to put vegetative screening easements on the site plan, the same as our authority?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Pease, I don't work enough with the UDC to know if it would actually become a platted easement, but it's going to be a landscaping site plan, so it would appear on the site plan, and it would become permanent and recorded.
It wouldn't become part of the plat. They do not have that authority.
Okay, so if we want a platted easement, that would be we would need to do that.
But we were just told we don't have the authority to do that.
Now I'm confused.
We have the authority to require it on a site plan as part of the conditional use process, but we don't have authority as part of the plat to put landscaping on a plat.
Maybe I'm confused, but are we not on G4, which is a final conditional use?
Yes, we're on the conditional use. But there's no plat involved there.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Mr. Phelps.
Yeah, I guess I do have a question about this item number 4. I'm wondering how we can adopt something that we haven't seen yet. And you're assuring us that we've done it before. I mean, do we really have to have this condition? If they have the authority to adopt the landscaping, why do we necessarily need to have this condition?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Phelps, good point. I lifted it from the Golden View case back in 2009, but strictly speaking, you're right. They can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they haven't taken that action, there's nothing for us to adopt by reference, so it's not appropriate for it to be in there.
I agree. I don't think it's appropriate to be in there. For one thing, we shouldn't be adopting something in the future we haven't reviewed. And secondly, if they have the authority, why would we want to basically take away their authority in this action?
Yeah, so we can just eliminate for. Any further questions? Hearing and seeing none, I will open the public hearing at this time and invite the petitioner or its representative to come forward. You are allowed 10 minutes for your presentation, and you can choose to reserve some time for rebuttal by letting us know how much of that time you'd like to reserve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I am Bruce Robeson, that's spelled R-O-B-S-O-N. I'm here representing the Anchorage Water Wastewater Utility in this application. I'm actually with the firm of MWH. In conjunction with me is Mr. Terry Schoenthal with Land Design North, who's assisted in preparation of the application and has also been doing the landscape and some of the site planning architectural work on this site for the concept. Also, Mr. Steve Nuss with the Anchorage Water Wastewater Utility is in the audience with us as well. So, again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to make the presentation. Relevant to reserving some of the time for rebuttal, I figured I'd take about 5 minutes to give a presentation, and then we'll go from there. I don't wish to rehash much of the information in the package. I think you'll find it's a pretty thorough package from content and information available. A couple of minor clarifications I'd like to make. Number one, the utility is a long-range planning entity. They look and do master plans for both their water and wastewater facilities for quite an extended period out. This has been part of that planning process for quite some time. We did conduct quite a sincere and thorough public education and involvement process. And what you'll find is ultimately in this area we had some very specific detailed technical criteria that we established, both elevation for a reservoir as well as physical site area. And as a result of that, we'd identified 4 sites, and that's discussed in this. And ultimately, both representatives in the communities and the utility came to an agreement on what they considered their primary desired site, and that's this site here we're talking about at the corner of Huffman and Elmore on the southeast side. Regarding, I think, a comment that staff got from somebody relevant to access to plans and such, both this application and the application for the UDC is on the utilities project website and has been made available for a while. So if that individual has a challenge, we can help direct them to there. So we haven't left anything off, and any information we have developed to date is available there. Also, there's been some questions regarding landscaping, and I believe your packets are numbered as the copy I have. If you go to page 169, there is a conceptual landscape site plan in there available for you to look at, and there's 2 reasons I'm referring you to that. You don't have?
We don't have I don't have numbers like that on my packet.
We don't have numbers like that in ours.
Could you show which one it is?
Maybe you could walk this up.
We don't have a packet like that.
Okay. Well, this is a packet I received from staff, so I assumed it was similar. So, but we can provide copies of this. However, there is a conceptual site plan with the landscaping concept on there. One of the reasons that I'm bringing that up is that plan shows 2 things. One is, and what has been referred to earlier as a 50-foot setback. That's a setback self-imposed by the utility to locate a facility.
I just have loose papers.
To locate a facility that they're developing, such as this facility here, to give it sufficient buffer from the property lines. Secondarily, there's a perimeter line on that landscaping plan that isn't easily identifiable, but basically is an estimate of what the limits of excavation would be in order to construct the facility. So, lastly, the utility's gone to great lengths with an attempt to try and improve the aesthetics of this facility as compared to many of their reservoir facilities. Their standard is a steel tank, and I think many of you have seen the one that's at Service High Reservoir, an example, or out at Kincaid Park, and maybe even up in Eagle River. They've selected and have committed to constructing something that's unique, and that's a concrete tank, enabling them to set this back into the ground and trying to retain some of the aesthetics of the topography of the land in this area here. There's some mutual benefits, but this is done at a premium, just so you know, above and beyond what a steel tank would cost. Yeah, however, it does quite a bit to improve the aesthetics there. Secondarily, they've committed to having a flat roof on this facility in lieu of a arched roof that's freestanding in order to lower the profile. So we've gone to great lengths to try and help here. But I think aside from that, you've got most all the information you need there. And I think at this point in time, we'll leave it open to questions.
Okay. Mr. Isham.
Yeah, I noticed you're going to be painting the tank gray. Is that the best way to camouflage it, or should it be green, or should it be striped, or should it have stuff like the inflatable driving range has on it, which we got involved in a number of years ago? I mean, I guess my real question is gray the best color, or should it be some other color?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It was actually one of my points I meant to cover. There's been a comment about painting it gray, and there's not been a proposal to paint it at all. The gray is actually the natural color and texture of the concrete itself. Painting concrete is not one of the best approaches for concrete. However, there is the ability to do some texturing or some changes in design on the tank to kind of break up the surface, and that we're investigating, but we haven't made a commitment on. But actually, the gray is really the color of the concrete.
Also, perhaps more to your point, the gray in the natural setting recedes from view, whereas a light color tends to come forward. So one of the positive things of that is that the natural gray color of the concrete, especially if some texture can be added to it so that it's non-reflective at all, it tends to recede in a natural setting, particularly if there's other spruce and native vegetation anywhere around.
What do you mean by texturing?
Well, as an example, if it had a lightly exposed surface, you might think of exposed aggregate. I'm not saying it would have an exposed aggregate per se, but it can have kind of a blast surface or something else that takes away any reflectivity of the tank that a natural form surface might have.
Okay, so you're not going to have a shiny surface is what you're saying.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Pease.
Yes, I have several questions. What about in terms of painting, the sort of tree silhouettes as we see on not the dome, but the tank next to Trailside Elementary School, which to my aesthetics is actually kind of a pleasant, natural-looking paint.
Well, I'm familiar with that one as well, but I think that in this particular case, the tank itself on the uphill side, there's only about 8 feet of the tank that comes up above the ground. On the Elmore corner, which is the highest corner, I think that it would be a wasted effort in this particular one. I honestly think that the tank is going to recede quite a bit from sight without any additional painting or representational art like tree forms or things added to it.
Okay. To follow up on that, one of my concerns is that a solid color looks like a blank slate to any high school teenagers making that turn, whether they're South High teenagers or rival teenagers. And I think there should be thought given to how to deter graffiti. And one possibility is, as I said, a blank surface may be more attractive than a surface that's I don't have any proof of that, but that's one point I wanted to put in there. And on that same vein, has there been any consideration of motion-triggered security cameras or lights, along with a posted notice, that could possibly help prevent people from climbing over that wall and putting their tags there?
I assume when you mean the wall, you mean the fencing nettle.
The fencing, yeah.
Fencing would be there. So There isn't along the perimeter. It's not normally the case unless there's a real security issue. The utility has a philosophy of escalating security as it's necessary. Relevant to lighting, many of the other facilities, if anything, in particular neighborhoods that we've received, is requests that the lighting of any type is minimized or mitigated so that it doesn't affect the neighborhood in general. So at this point in time, there wasn't that consideration, though.
All right, well, maybe we'll hear from the neighbors. I was suggesting motion triggered. I understand they don't want it highlighted. A couple more quick questions. I can't recall what municipal code allows or prohibits in terms of barbed or that sort of wire on top of fencing. I didn't see any. I mean, it's pretty ugly. Is there a plan or a policy, Mr. Barrett, that wouldn't allow it?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And then with regard to the tree cover, in looking at the landscape plan provided in our packet, looks as if excavation will come up to within 10 feet of the south lot line and 20 feet or so, or 10 to 20 feet of some of the other lot lines. Is there then no ability to preserve any of the native vegetation, the mature trees on the site? Is there no ability to do that?
With the objective of constructing the facility here that we intend to, which is going to be a fairly expensive facility, short of driving sheet pile to pull back the excavation, which would be also in a very expensive additional expense beyond that, we've tried to define it under a conservative method of what that limits could be. So.
Okay. And finally, with regard to the plantings, given that the native vegetation's going to be pretty well removed except on one corner of the property, I'm wondering about the density of plantings. There's only kind of a single row of plantings around parts of it, probably about around half of it. And is Chugach amenable to at least a double row? I'm just looking at the full perimeter, and
The utility relies on both the retained landscape architect to assist in that advice as well as the UDC. So Anchorage Water Wastewater would probably be amenable if that's an appropriate level of density to increasing density. Sometimes increasing density, and I'm going to let Terry speak to that, often can choke out the vegetation. So
I'm sorry if I said Chugach.
One of the considerations that we're making for the native plantings here is that we do show the plantings of spruce and birch that are a bit larger to start with, but we're also proposing that in this particular case we might include willow sprig plantings and some alder plantings and some other things that would be in there that would not be real impressive necessarily at the start, but in fact come along a lot quicker than some of the larger plants in time that would naturalize that site. So it's one of the considerations that we are looking at right now.
Okay. You about ready to wrap up?
Yes, I have no more. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton.
How deep is the tank underground?
30 feet.
So it's 30 feet underground.
There's 8 feet exposed. The tank itself is 30 feet in height. At the very top, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, the standard for that tank is approximately 32 feet plus or minus, depending on the amount of freeboard they need in it. The elevation that we're sitting on is a mid-height elevation of approximately 455 or 460 feet. The top of the ground in the backside ranges roughly in a 470 plus feet in elevation, so it'll probably be sitting in the ground on the lower end as much as a half a dozen feet, but then the ground, of course, comes up around it, so there's about, I think we're estimating roughly 8 feet, about 8 feet roughly exposed on the top end.
Why not bury the whole thing?
It's really a parameter of hydraulics, and we are getting the tank at what I want to call a very tight range of hydraulics right now in order to make it operate, and that's what controls it.
So you need a certain elevation to have.
Exactly.
What's that elevation then?
The mid-height elevation of the tank is in the range of 455 to 460 feet is what we're shooting for.
All right, thanks.
Any further questions? Seeing none, you do have rebuttal time, and I'll work hard to remember this time. Is there anyone else that would like to testify in this case? If so, please come forward. Anyone at all?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Again, my name is Tim Stevens. I live on the corner of Elmore and Huffman, and my address is 12400 Elmore Road. First of all, I'd like to thank the AWWU for trying to accommodate the concerns that the local property owners have regarding this site. However, I am asking that the Commission not approve the conditional use permit based on the following two issues. This is the wrong location, folks, for another utility. If this goes forward, there will be 3 utilities on this site. This is asking for some problems, especially after 9/11 with sabotage. If a well-placed explosive device was to go off, it would take out the 12-inch gas line coming from Kenai that supplies gas for the city. It would take out the electrical utility, the substation, yes, it's only a substation, but it would still impact that local community, and the water reservoir itself would go. This is not good development. You don't put 3 utilities next to each other in this day and age. I'm sorry, it's just the wrong thing to do. My second issue on this is the selection process was flawed. The citizen committee that was put together to look at the sites, potential sites for a water reservoir, were told not to take into consideration the purchase of the property to place the tank. I believe this is so because AWWU already owns a site that they had planned to put a tank on. They actually carved out 2.5 acres out of the South Anchorage High School site for this tank that they were supposed to do that. In doing so, they made the site location for the high school too small. It didn't meet standards, yet that was still approved. My question to them is, if they don't put a tank on that site down on 135th, will they give that property back to the school? My other point on the selection process, many of the points used to select the site were very subjective. In your view, do you think that the properties are well screened? That's subjective, and I'm sorry, that wasn't very good science on their part. If you choose to grant the conditional use permit, I ask that you require the tank be buried more. I heard the petitioner speak a little bit about that, but if I refer to your packet, the technical amendment number 2, page 2, states, it's on the second page, to maximize the number of customers served to the west, the reservoir elevation at mid-tank must be between 390 and 455 feet.
Okay. I need you to sum up, and maybe there'll be some questions for you.
Currently, the tank is proposed for the maximum height, so they could lower that tank considerably and still meet their gravitational needs for the system. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing I can ask, I was asked to gate the access, again, this was not being discussed at the last one. If you look at the plat, that driveway facility is clearly on the expanded electrical property, and it should be gated to prevent the general public from getting in on that site.
Okay. Are there any questions? Mr. Isham.
Yes, sir. Could you continue explaining the heights and so forth that you were referring to there when you ran out of time?
Well, I believe the petitioner mentioned that they need to get a certain height to continue the gravitation feed from the Klutna. So the whole system is a gravity feed. They are proposing to use the maximum height allowed. They could get down to as low as an elevation of 390 feet and still meet the gravitational needs for that system. They're proposing 455. There's clearly 65 feet differential, and that's more than the height of the tank. They could bury the whole tank and still get the gravitational feed that they need.
Could you say again where that is?
It's on, I believe it's your packet. This is the one I got from the Community Council that you gave to them. It's called the Technical Amendment Number 2, an overview of the South Anchorage Water Improvement Project, SAWIP. It doesn't have a page number, unfortunately, so I can't reference a page number. It does say in the bottom, Technical Amendment Number 2, about midway through your packet. And that description's under new reservoirs on page 2.
I'm going to trust you that it's there.
I can show it to you if you wish.
We don't have the same kind of packets that you do, apparently.
They gave him the good one, huh?
Yeah, they gave him, what we have has no page numbers on it.
It says Planning and Zoning Commission on the very bottom, on page 1. It has the date for today's date and time.
That's the routing packet that goes out initially before
Okay.
it's even done.
So that's in the application packet.
Okay.
Well, can I ask a question while we hunt?
Oh, please do, Mr.
Maybe
Webb.
moving on then. So did you get a look at the landscaping plan?
I did. I agree with Commissioner Pease's thoughts on it, that it's rather sparse. It's also built on the premise that on the west side of the tank, where they would clear away the majority of the mature vegetation that they really should keep, they will backfill that with some of the spoils. So there will be a rather steep slope there. There already is a steep slope there with a retaining wall, so there will be, almost look like a mountain there. If you were to bury the tank, you would not have to have that additional fill brought in, and that slope would be more gentle, and it would actually accommodate better landscaping. As far as the plants being planted, I think it's a good move to put spruce and birch in there, as long as they're of large enough caliber that the moose don't come by and snap them off, particularly the spruce, the birch. And I'd also recommend that they use white spruce and not go with an Ingle spruce or some non-native species of spruce that doesn't grow very well and doesn't fill out, doesn't provide enough buffer. One thing that's also that they failed to mention in this packet here, they talked about the number of properties that were that could have been potentially impacted. They failed to note those properties on the north side of Huffman that would look directly into the largest face of the tank.
Thank you. Are there further questions from commissioners? Apparently not. Thank you. Oh, Ms. Pease, you had another question for for him.
Two questions. Do you, as a nearby neighbor, have any comments on lighting or security? And then the second question is to follow up on your pointing out the properties north across Huffman. You said they look directly in. Is that because the substation, isn't there the substation and some trees in between?
Okay. I'll try to answer your first question first. I think I read in the packet that I got that there would not normally be any lighting for this facility. If there is lighting, I would ask that it be down-pointing cutoff fixtures so that there is no environmental trespass of that light onto adjoining properties. Regarding the view from the north, with the expansion of the Chugach electric parcel, a vast portion of that is already cleared in the gravel pad. So those people immediately across from Huffman would have a direct shot into the face of that tank and not be screened by the electrical utility. Those people to the east of the north would look across the utility into the tank.
Thank you. Yeah, and now I can see it on the air photo. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming out this evening. Is there anyone else that would like to testify in this matter? Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one, you have rebuttal time left, Mr. Robeson. Yes, give him 6 minutes. Yes, sir.
I'll do my best to hit most of the points I think I heard Mr. Stevens mention. I don't think I got them all, but either way. Relevant to the concernable risk of the common utilities in the area, all I can speak for is really the water wastewater utility. And when you do a risk assessment approach, you normally take into consideration redundancy as one of the protective measures, and having multiple reservoirs in a community assists you with redundancy, and therefore helps to mitigate concerns over potential risks that you could face as discussed. So I can't speak to the gas line that runs the entire length of Elmore from basically, I think if I'm not incorrect, it comes from down Whittier Way. And I can't speak to the substation because I don't know its area of service. Relevant to the flaws in the selection process, and I'll address first the one that Mr. Stevens was mentioning. The intent of the statement there of the 390 feet to 455 feet is a zone of pressure ranges that the reservoir will service and support. Therefore, in order to do that through gravity, you need to have that elevation at that 455 feet to make that service, not at 390. Otherwise, you're going to have to pump the water additionally to get that elevation. So the interpretation of that language is incorrect, just so you know. So giving the property back, and there was discussion about the previous land that the utility acquired, and if I'm not incorrect, they acquired that, I think, in the early 90s when South Anchorage High School was being identified, and the utility identified that under that current scenario of what development patterns were like in Anchorage, felt that that property would suffice. So therefore, they acquired that land from during the high school siting. That property is too low to do the objective. It was identified as one of the potential sites that was reviewed by the advisory group, and they also concurred that it doesn't really meet the needs as technically stated in the technical aspects that were presented by the utility. With respect to giving it back to the school district, that would be a utility call. I don't have any say over that.
And Mr. Robeson, our purpose here tonight is to make a decision about the application before us. You don't need to justify the selection of the site.
Understood.
Okay.
Relevant to gating, this conditional use doesn't address Chugach's site. It addresses the utility site, so I can't speak to the gating on the Chugach's entryway. Those are the key points that I got a sense from.
Okay. I see Ms. D. Did you have something you wish to add, sir?
Well, one of the person testifying also noted that from the north, the view would have a significant impact. And we did prepare photorealistic simulations from the entire circumference, all the way around that. I believe those are in your packet, but the one in particular from Elmore, from the north, is identified on the board right here, and I can show you.
Oh, you need to talk into the microphone because, yeah.
The top image there is the existing conditions. The bottom image shows the tank and shows approximately the height above the surrounding area. And that is the most prominent view, as the former individual testified.
So it's really not much. Okay. All right. We have some questions. Did you have questions? Ms. Dean? Well, you withdrew. Mr. Weddleton.
Could you run through that elevation of the water again? So I'm looking here, and just looking at it quickly, mid-tank must be 390 to 455 feet. But that's...
I believe that document is one that was also used during the advisory group process to look for properties additionally, and was arranged that was identified that this is a zone that has to be served in order to make it. And then there's a design document, also a pre-design document that's part of that package that carries it to further investigation and detail. And the bottom line is, in order to serve the areas that this intends to be, they have to meet at least a 455-foot hydraulic grade line, and that's why I said that window's so critical at the elevation of the tank. If you put a tank at 390 feet for your bin line, then you're going to be having to pump another 65 feet, and that therefore loses all of the advantage of using the inclutant water coming down, the hydraulic gravity grade line coming down from the treatment plant. So there's not a benefit to do that, for one. And the objective of this was to get a site that could maximize the use of that gravity.
So basically these are old numbers, and you've come up with better numbers since then?
Well, I think that the range they were initially looking for was in that range, but the objective always has been to maximize the use of that gravity head and to shoot for that maximum elevation.
All right, thanks.
Any further questions from commissioners? Mr. Phelps.
I just want to go back to the site selection process. I have been looking at the packet, and it seems like there's a fairly deliberate and thorough site selection process that's outlined here. Can you summarize it very quickly, the number of sites that you analyzed?
We had some established criteria for the sites. Number one, it was an elevation issue of we had to fit within a very tight window of elevation. And that was the range that was indicated that we were shooting for, that elevation range at about 455 feet mid-tank height. Also, the area to meet that needs was basically south of Huffman Road and east of Elmore Road. And also, we had to find, and basically also bounded on the south by DeArmond Road there. Also, the other criteria was if it wasn't a municipal land, then it had to be some form of someone who was willing to sell their property, and those were kind of established that. As a result of looking at all that, additionally, I think it was a 2-acre site at minimum that we were looking for. Going through that process, we were only really able to identify what could be considered 3 properties that really met that criteria, and additionally, we looked at the utilities' existing land at the corner of the high school, since it was already under their ownership, and those were the sites that were looked at. The process was established in 2007 and went through quite an extensive review with both an advisory group established by representatives of several of the community councils in the area that we identified, as well as some ad hoc residents. Also, we did presentations to all the community councils and continue to present to the community councils to keep them informed of where we're at and where we're headed to and what our desires are. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from the commission? Seeing none, the hearing is closed and the matter rests with the commission. Mr. Phelps has made a motion, seconded by Ms. Bees. Mr. Phelps.
Yes, I recommend final conditional use approval for a new 5 million gallon reservoir at the site indicated, subject to the conditions identified by staff, but adding one additional condition, which would be condition 7, that would state that the normal hours of operation for maintenance would be between 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday for non-emergency purposes.
And what about the proposed condition 4?
Oh, yes. Delete condition 4.
Okay. Do you concur, Ms. Pease?
Yes, I'd like to offer a couple of friendly amendments.
Why don't you try them one at a time, please?
I will. The first friendly amendment would be to condition 5, where I would add, this pertains to the period of construction, I would add a condition for the frequent removal of gravel or debris that may be tracked off-site onto the road shoulders and pathways.
Yes, that's fine.
My next proposed conditions, and I'm not sure whether these would end up as conditions of approval or recommendations to UDC, but they are as follows.
Nancy, I just need to clarify whether it's a friendly amendment or it's not.
I'll propose them as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. Pre-construction marking and protection of any vegetation to be maintained with the markings to be verified in the field by MOA staff.
Question, what is the purpose of the pre-construction markings?
When there's a huge amount of excavation on a site like this with major grade changes, it's really easy for the equipment operators to swing their shovels around and take out trees that should remain.
Okay, that's fine, yeah.
I would also have a condition for additional density of tree plantings. Where replanting is necessary, plant with at least a double row of conifers around the full perimeter.
Okay, I'm not going to accept that.
Okay. No barbed or concertina wire or similar barriers?
Around the site?
Yes.
That's acceptable.
Okay. And then consideration of motion-triggered security cameras or lights as a deterrent to graffiti?
Who would that be resolved by? Planning?
Yeah, that could be resolved by planning staff.
If it's stated that the resolution is through planning and they have the final determination.
Okay. And likewise, resolved through planning a condition that would not allow any steadily operating floodlights.
Again, that would be satisfactory, again, subject to planning.
That's all.
Okay. Ms. Dean.
Madam Chair, through the chair, I have some comments about some of the items that Commissioner Pease has added. The first item, the frequent removal of debris so it doesn't end up on the sidewalks and on the street. That's already covered. This lot is large enough, it's already covered by the EPA and the MOA, so there's actually quite a lot of government oversight so that debris does not end up all over. It also covers dust in the air, too. So there's quite a lot of oversight. The next thing that you talked about was pre-construction marking of vegetation. That's a nice idea, but we're talking about driving pilings and doing some massive excavation. I don't think it's fair to them to require that they do that with their vegetation. I think that's a bit excessive. The barbed wire issue. I think the security should be left up to them on what they want for barbed wire. And if they want cameras or motion lights, I think they have the best judgment on what their security issues are and what the final requirements should be. And that's it.
Okay. Well, because those have all been agreed to as friendly amendments, they're part of the main motion now, unless someone moves to remove them. Mr. Weddleton.
Excuse me, I'd like to add two conditions. One, did we add one regarding parking? Was there anything in there?
Do we have
parking?
one?
No.
No, okay. Just a brief one that I think Mr. Barrett had mentioned as well, and that would be areas provided for parking will be buffered with a minimum for, I said L3 buffer landscaping, but L3 doesn't exist yet, so can you recommend buffer landscaping is enough to just say that?
The parking
Question.
needs to be buffered on
Parking.
this site?
Areas provided for parking will be buffered with landscaping.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Weddleton, frequently parking areas are just buffered with visual enhancement landscaping. I'll accept whatever we want to put in there, but buffer, that's another 8-foot average width and so forth. We're talking about a rarely used parking area.
The goal there would not be to hide the cars so much, but to hide the cleared land. You know, if they have a 1,000 square feet or 2,000 or something that's just cleared, you'd want that tucked in the trees somewhere. That's my goal.
Can I ask a question, staff? What are the parking requirements for this facility? Are there any? Madam Chair, Commissioner Phelps, no, there are no parking requirements. It's not a manned site. We just suggested 3 legal-sized parking spaces if it would make the commission and the public feel better about it. No.
You don't accept that?
No.
Well, can I propose that and we'll vote on it then?
You could propose it as a motion
Okay,
and
well-
have it be, and then we'll vote on it.
Okay, well, I'd move to add a condition that areas provided for parking will be buffered with
No, this
landscaping.
is, we need to keep the secretary needs to keep it straight. You're proposing an amendment to the motion.
Correct.
No, a regular amendment. Yes. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Weddleton.
Should I just start over? Okay, I'd move to add a condition that areas provided for parking will be buffered with landscaping. Oh, sorry.
And we don't currently have a requirement for parking.
Well, this wouldn't require parking. This just, presumably they'll clear some land to put vehicles for maintenance and so on there now and again, and that area
Okay.
could be cleared right along Elmore. And we've heard in testimony that they don't want to look at this. You know, it's a major development across the street from some residences, and this just requires that they put the parking in a place where it will be hidden from the road.
Okay, and that was seconded by Ms. Pease. Is there objection to this motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we need to use our machines. Can you set it up for us? Okay, that motion fails,
I have another one.
or that amendment. You can try another amendment, Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, I'd like to amend what is condition 5 and what we have in front of us, though I suppose would change since 4 went away. But just to add at the end, it says, where it says along the pathway to Huffman Elementary, I would add, and for students at South High School.
Say that again, please. And
for students at South High School.
okay. So it's a friendly amendment to the main motion.
Correct.
Okay, I accept that.
Give me just a moment.
Okay, so that was accepted as a friendly amendment. Are you finished now, Mr. Weddleton?
I am, thank you.
Okay. Are there any further amendments to the motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Isham?
Yeah, I just have a question, not an amendment. We had these friendly amendments that were accepted that discussion indicated that they were covered by other federal guidance and so forth. And I guess my question of staff is if it's covered by the feds and it's covered by us, does it really matter if we leave our stuff in there? I mean, is it going to have any impact?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Isham, no, it has no additional impact. I think what Ms. Dean was referring to is we've got the air quality regs for dust control. Right-of-way has its own set of rules for tracking materials off-site and out onto their right-of-way, of which they are very protective. I think we're covered regardless.
What this does by having it in here, Mr. Isham, is that it gives us the power through code enforcement, if it's not being done, to do something for the municipality to do something about it.
I just want to make sure that we weren't going to get crosswise with the feds.
Because we do add things for this type of language for gravel pits.
Well, also the motion was accepted on the basis that there would be discretion on the part of the planning department to impose this requirement or not as appropriate.
Right. Any further discussion? I think we need some findings on the records, Ms. Pease, or whoever made the motion.
Yes, I made the motion.
Okay.
South Anchorage has a growing residential population, and...
I'm sorry, didn't I make the motion?
Oh, sorry, you did.
You did, okay.
I mean, she can go ahead and do it if she wants.
I can make them after you, if necessary.
You have the privilege of speaking.
Yeah, I think it's
the motion
appropriate
as the
that,
maker.
since I was the principal motion maker, to do it. In this particular case, it seems that it's been demonstrated that a water facility of this type is necessary. It's been demonstrated there's been a significant and thorough site selection process. We have heard significant comments on the proposed development that indicate that this particular project would be blended quite effectively with the surrounding landscaping or with the surrounding terrain. We've also heard that there is not going to be extensive traffic generation, if any, from this site, and that the other environmental considerations that are part of code are going to be met. And for all these reasons, I would support the motion to approve the conditional use for this particular facility.
Okay. Further comments on the motion? Ms. Pease?
Yes, I would just add that it's within our purview in providing conditions of approval for a conditional use to address impacts such as we may identify. We have in the past, as Ms. Jones noted, given conditions to ensure that gravel will be cleared off the roadways, and I think that's very appropriate in an area where students will be riding bikes to school and young drivers will be spinning around those corners. I consider that an important safety condition that we have added. We have attempted to maintain some of the tranquility and scenery of the neighborhood through the new condition, restricting normal maintenance to Monday through Friday, sort of standard hours. The visual impact of the tank is mitigated somewhat. It's still a very large structure. AWW used to be commended in partly burying it. And I think we've tried to ensure that it is further screened by vegetation with some of the additional conditions that I offered. Pre-construction marking of vegetation is something we have done numerous times. And then I think the denser tree plantings are something that's pretty important when you have a structure of this scale. So with our conditions, we've tried to help this needed but very large facility fit into the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you, Ms. Pease. Mr. Isham?
And, Madam Chair, I would also like to include on our findings that in the Anchorage 2020 plan, policies 3, 42, 44, 73, 75, and 76, and 80 all apply to utilities, substation design and siting, and it appears that this particular design supports those particular policies.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton, you had?
Yeah, I would actually, regarding the findings that staff had on page 7 that Commissioner Isham had in there. Maybe just embellish on the policy 3, which in the staff's description describes increase in dwelling units in southeast Anchorage that mostly would be on-site services. So this is really a facility installed for the water users not on the hillside, but south or west of the hillside. And also that another finding that this tank is outside of the water utilities service area, and so requires the extra care that was given to mitigate the impacts on the neighborhood. Not if that's correct. This is outside of your certified area. Correct. Is that correct?
Any further comments? I will just offer a couple at the end here. Well, I'll start where Mr. Weddleton left off. Even though where this particular water tank is being located is outside the boundaries of the AWWU certificated service area, there are times when water from that system does find itself being used up in that area, and that's in those instances when fire trucks have to haul water to assist with fires on the hillside in areas where there aren't hydrants. And a water utility in a community isn't, it's not optional, whether you have an on-site system or you have a community system, or like I do live in AWWU system, so all I have to do is turn on my faucet or call somebody and say, why is there no water coming out? But I think that in this instance, the site is appropriate. They've taken care to buffer it from the neighborhood, and quite frankly, with it only being being up 8 feet out of the ground, that's really not very much in the bigger system of things. And I suspect most of the people in the neighborhood are probably going to not be that aware of it, especially with a lot of evergreen trees, around, and I will be voting to support it. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved, subject to the conditions of approval. A resolution will be coming out within the next few weeks on this, and a copy can be gotten from staff. We're going to move right on to our last case here, which is G5. The petitioner is Chugach Electric Association. This has been utility night. And the request is for a rezoning of Track 2 International Industrial Center subdivision from and that's fine, Mr. Phelps. Track 2 International Industrial Center subdivision from I-1 to I-2, from light industrial to heavy industrial. Can we have the staff presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. March 11th of this year, we mailed out 60 public hearing notices. Did not receive any responses to those notices. This is a major rezoning, but in another sense, it is also not much more than a housekeeping item. In 2008, an assembly ordinance authorized the municipality to allow Chugach Electric Association and Municipal Light and Power to begin a joint project for construction of a new power generation facility at this location. The rezoning is needed because under the current Title 21, I-1 zoning does not allow this type of use. And under the proposed Title 21, should the utilities decide to wait till that is in place, I-1 will still restrict the height of the property, of any buildings on the property. There would be prohibitions about certain office uses that the utilities would like to have at the generation station, and it would also require a conditional use. So bottom line is, under no matter what scenario the property is developed, it really needs to be I-2 for a power generation station. The surrounding properties are mostly zoned I-1 and I-2, manufacturing, warehousing, some office uses. The railroad right-of-way, approximately 200 feet in width, is on the east side of the property. For the standards for a rezoning, beginning on page 7 under findings, item A, conformance to the comprehensive plan, we've identified a few policies that do support this proposal. In addition, the 1982 plan, Anchorage 2020, and the draft 2006 land use plan map all identify this property for industrial, heavy industrial, and industrial reserve type uses. Item B, the zoning map amendment may be approved only if it is in the best interest of the public, considering the following factors. Item 1, the effect of the development under the amendment on the surrounding area. Environment, noise. The application states that noise generated by the new facility will be less than 50 decibels, which is within the range of normal human conversation. Air ordinance, the plant is to be naturally gas-fired, so we're not looking at diesel fuel burning and so forth. And, of course, the municipal air ordinance is in place and will apply. Seismic, the area is Site 3, moderate ground zones, ground failure susceptibility. There is an existing CEA facility at this property. Compatible with existing land use patterns, again, the surrounding properties are I-1 and I-2, manufacturing, warehousing, and the railroad. Transportation and drainage issues. Transportation and, traffic and PM&E did not provide any comments. They'll be doing most of their review under the permitting process. Access to the site will be from Electron Drive on the west or from Dowling on the south. Public services and facilities, there's an AWWU main line on 56th Avenue. There is no increase in population. This is not a residential development. Schools will not be impacted. The area is located within the municipal police, fire, and building safety service areas. Item 2, the supply of land in the relevant area and how will it be affected by this zoning change. It's not applicable, really. There is no practical difference between I-1 and I-2 for most uses. We just need to do this to make the construction of a new power plant legal. Item 3, the time when development would occur. Permitting will begin this year, construction next year, and hopefully completion by 2014. And finally, the effect of the amendment on the distribution of land uses and residential densities. Again, not applicable. This area is shown as industrial, heavy industrial and industrial reserve. And a change from I-1 to I-2 is not significant in that sense. The department supports the rezoning. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Phelps.
I guess I'm surprised we're even dealing with this in a way. Why are we? I mean, it's obviously industrial right now. It's zoned I-1. And the reason we're doing it is because we have power generation facilities on it. Is that what's happening now? Because I thought there was power generation facilities on it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Phelps, there is a CEA station there now. Why we're doing the rezoning is because I-1 does not allow it.
So we have an existing use that's not consistent with I-1.
Correct.
That's what I heard.
I'm sure it must be grandfathered.
Must be grandfathered in. Okay. And this area has always been intended for this type of use, as I recall.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess the last question is that You haven't recommended any special limitations, and I presume the reason why is because you feel that there's existing municipal code that deals with the various aspects effectively.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Phelps, yes, essentially I'm open to anything you'd like to propose, but it is I-2, and that's any legal use.
Well, you were mentioning about the 50 decibel level. Now, I wouldn't propose something like that, but what was your reasoning in terms of not having a special limitation dealing with something of that nature?
The application states that because of how it will be insulated and that it is naturally gas-fired, the sound levels are probably going to be under 50 dB.
Okay, so it wouldn't be necessary then?
I don't see it.
No.
You've got the railroad separating the plant from the neighborhood, and it is an I-1, I-2 area.
Thanks.
Mr. Weddleton.
When they come, is there any kind of like site plan review or anything like that as a next step, or is this we rezone and they can go ahead and do it?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Weddleton, this is it. Either under this code or the next one to come along, it'll be a permitted use, and they're ready to go.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Pease.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. Like Mr. Phelps, I thought the purpose wasn't clearly stated, but Chugach's letter on page 21 says that the reason for the rezoning is that the definition of the I-1 zoning will change under proposed Title 21 and put restrictions on height requirements and require a conditional use permit. And since they have stated need on page 17 to build a new power plant for efficiency and for just replacement and upgrade, that appears to me to be the reason. So that's not quite what I heard Mr. Barrett say, but my understanding is that the I-1 zone is changing, the definition is changing, and that's why they're doing it.
And we have an opportunity to ask petitioners when they come forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Apparently not. I will open the public hearing and invite the petitioner's representative to come forward. And do you wish to reserve any of your 10 minutes for rebuttal?
Yes, good evening. Yes, I would appreciate reserving 5 minutes.
Okay, and you can start any time you'd like by stating your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Paul Risse, R-I-S-S-E. I'm with Chugach Electric. I'm the Vice President of Power Supply, managing the generation. And hopefully I can clarify a few issues. You're being handed out 2 documents, one a map with a photograph showing the existing site. And you'll see on it identified the Chugach headquarters parcel. That's the subject of interest. Something I certainly want to note is there is an existing power plant there today identified as IGT 1, 2, and 3. This parcel was purchased in 1960. That plant was built in the mid-60s. And we continue to run it. You also can see in the southern portion of the site the South Central Power Project, and that is something we are developing jointly with the Municipal Light and Power Utility, and that's the new power project that we're anticipating having online actually by mid-2013. There's one point I'd like to clarify on page 21 of the material provided by the Planning Department. In the paragraph, it does state that under current zoning, a power plant is permitted. And something I'd like to clarify is our concern is the proposed changes to Title 21 would change that power plant permitted use under I-1 such that it would require a conditional use permit. And we're in the midst of this project, and so as not to disrupt the schedule and the benefits achieved by that, we're pursuing an I-2 zoning change, and I'll explain that a little further. If you look at the project schedule here on the right, starting in 2007, we had been working with Municipal Light and Power jointly for a siting study considering quite a few sites, and it settled on the Chugach headquarters site. As a matter of fact, the exact site we're proposing, the South Central Power Project. That led into 2008 working on a participation agreement, which was achieved and agreed to by the municipality and ordinance in August of that year. And that allowed the municipality and Chugach to work together here for the joint South Central Power Project. Now we've continued on, and where we are today, about here third quarter of 2010, we're anticipating going to the building permit for permitting, building permits. And that's where our concern lies, in that adaptation of changes in Title 21 might require then, if it was zoned I-1, a conditional use permit and disrupt this schedule. Therefore, we're pursuing the I-2 zoning, also supported by the planning department, as I see in the documents. And then we continue further with potential construction here at the end of 2010 with approximate 2 years construction period, and once again completion in 2013. Someone did note earlier concerns with gas supply, and this is one of the significant things that can be done in the community to reduce gas consumption. It's a far more efficient plant, and that's one of the major drivers for doing this plant, and it also addresses the issue with aging power supply equipment. Both MLMP and Chugach Electric, our most recent additions to a generation, have been 30 years ago. So there are concerns with aging equipment, and it's been expressed numerous times by the utilities in Alaska. So I reserve any additional time for questions.
Well, that was perfect. That you used exactly 5 minutes, Mr. Rissy. Mr. Phelps has a question for you.
Okay. My understanding is that you're going to have a larger power generation facility, and that's going to be located in the diagram that's labeled South Central Power Project?
That is correct.
Okay. So what I'm getting from this is that you are going to have a new facility at a different location on the site that you now own, and that location is going to be here.
That's correct.
Okay. Not to put words in your mouth, but do you view this area as being a heavy industrial area?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there further questions from commissioners? Oh.
Sorry.
Mr. Weddleton.
What does this on your schedule? It says construction begins after air permit. What does the air permit cover?
Yes, we have to go to ADEC to receive an air emissions permit, and we really can't begin construction until we receive that permit. We can perform some civil work prior to that time, but putting in foundations and any work beyond that cannot be done until we receive that emissions permit.
And that's like the fumes from the power plant would be?
Yes, the permit addresses major pollutants, NOx, CO, particulates.
So it was referred to as a pocket of residential, but I counted in there's about 170 homes just to the northeast. And would they smell this plant, or are there fume issues with them?
They should smell nothing. Normally if there's, I'll characterize a little bit, a smell associated with sulfur that has to do with high sulfur content fuels. As noted earlier, this is a gas-only plant. Gas has very low sulfur emissions, and all of us burn sulfur in our homes, and I don't detect it in my own home, but and our existing power plants, you don't smell sulfur.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dean.
Through the chair, I'm curious on the Dowling Road extension. When do you plan on actually paving Dowling Road through to Electron Drive?
Well, for our project here, noted there are actually 3 roads around the site. Electron Drive here to the west, Dowling Road to the south, and actually this other piece of road connected to Electron Drive, and we can access that site via those 3 roads, and our assessments have really indicated we have no additional need for completion.
Okay. Are there further questions from commissioners?
Yep.
Mr. Phillip?
One additional question. This part of the diagram down here, is that owned by you folks as well, too? This area down here?
If I may, characterizing the lavender or slightly pinkish color, that is Granite's property, Granite Construction.
Okay, so it's not owned by you.
That is not owned by Chugach Electric.
Okay.
We do own this piece, SPP laydown area. We own the operations storage area, and then the site we're asking for the zone change.
Now, why wouldn't you include the SPP laydown area as part of this rezoning?
We're not anticipating putting a power plant on there. It's really, we're anticipating storage of utility equipment.
But isn't that associated with a heavy industrial use?
I believe it's permitted under I-1.
Okay.
Are there further questions from the commission? Apparently not. You still have some rebuttal time, and we'll see if there's anyone else that wishes to testify on this matter.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to testify on this case? If so, please come forward. Anyone at all? Can you see if there's anybody over there, Kim? Okay. Seeing and hearing no one, do you have any, Mr. Rissy, do you have anything else that you wish to say? You have 5 more minutes left.
Well, I appreciate it. I do believe this is a good project for the community, as I noted earlier. As far as emissions go, this is substantially less than any existing power plant, substantially less CO2, substantially less fuel. We save approximately several $1 million a month, Chugach and MLP combined. That will be our savings primarily in fuel. So I certainly believe this is a very good project for the community. And nothing else. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
I do have one question for you. This long pink line that says permitting, do you have to get lots of permits before you can build this generation plant?
Well, we certainly have to get quite a few, building permits being one of them, but the emission permit takes a long period of time, and preparing that has taken a long period of time. We submitted that last week.
Okay.
And then it'll be a period of time before we receive that, and it's quite an effort.
It's quite an effort. I'm sure it is. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'll close the hearing, and the matter rests with the commission. Yes, you may, Mr. Phelps, if you turn on your microphone.
I have.
Okay.
So the question I have for staff is the issue really here, is this a heavy industrial zone? That's the real issue to me. And so the question I have is that, in your opinion, does this area meet the requirement of a heavy industrial zone as conforming to the new code?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Phelps, yes. Based on the draft land use plan that will be adopted with the new zoning code at the end, it is shown as a heavy industrial area with I-2 uses appropriate.
Okay, I'm ready for a motion. Did you make a motion, Ms. Pease?
I did.
Okay, and Mr. Frederick, it looks like you seconded it. Okay.
In the matter of case 2010-028, the rezoning of Chugach Electrical Association property, I move for approval with as recommended by the department.
Okay, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes. This is a upgrade in infrastructure, utility infrastructure that the municipality most definitely needs. The current power plant is several decades old and it isn't up to the modern efficiency standards. The proposed construction of the new plant, as noted in the Chugach Electric packet, will be far more efficient, using 25% natural gas than existing plants. This represents benefits to the environment from reduced emissions. It represents conservation of an increasingly scarce fuel resource, and it represents presumably better economy for consumers. A major reason for this rezone is to avoid potential delays in the permitting and construction from the anticipated change in the municipal zoning code. Title 21 will no longer allow this type of power facility in the I-1 zone, which this property is currently zoned. So this ensures smooth continuation of their project. This is a largely industrial area with long established heavy industrial uses. There is some residential development on one border of the property. Any anticipated emissions issues would come up during their quality permitting. It's also worth noting that there has been a power plant here for a number of years in proximity to the residential area. So I will be supporting this motion. Oh, I guess I should also say that this meets several Title 21 comp plan policies. That rezones, Policy 5, that rezones shall be compatible in scale with adjacent uses. And it retains key industrial lands for industrial purposes. That's all.
I'd just like to add a clarification, which is, although the petitioner identified as one of the principal reasons for requesting a rezoning the change in Title I to avoid possible delays in permitting, that in fact the rezoning to I-2 is an appropriate designation for this area. And so willy-nilly, the permitting problems, the rezoning is appropriate for this particular area to I-2.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, I concur. If you look at on page 2 of our packet, the adjacent property to the south is I-2, and there's also I-2 to the south beyond that. So it really fits right in, and the residential area that's to the north and the east is separated by the railroad. There's quite a separation there. I think this is a very certainly it's just a continuing use, and I'm very familiar with the existing generation system there, because for many years I used to go monthly and drop off my electric bill before I could pay it electronically online, and I even find the existing generation plant quiet, and expect this one will be, certainly an improvement. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, that motion's approved, and this will go forward to the Assembly for its consideration. And this brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening. Does the Secretary have anything for us? Do you have anything for us from the Director?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I do have one thing. Save the big packet from Providence that we had to bring back next week. For those of you that didn't make it to the directors' meeting recently, Mr. Phelps, and I didn't mean to say Mr. Phelps, Mr. Weaver requested that commissioners re-express interest with regard to committee that they may have an interest in, and he asked that people send me an email, and so far I've gotten emails from 2 people, Mr. Weddleton and Miss Dean. And so it would be good if the others of you could think about it and send me an email. And we should be having a new commissioner to replace Mr. Morrison soon. Any comments from commissioners?
I can volunteer for the site selection committee, school site selection.
You're happy where you're at? Art's happy. Bruce, school sites. Because it's probably we're not doing anymore, Bruce. Is that why you select? Well, the rest of you could send me an email. All right, Mr. Frederick. No laughing. Yeah. Well, since you're so... Okay, how about somebody making a motion to adjourn so we can all go home and catch the 10 o'clock news?
So moved.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Well, we almost got done with our agenda.